Hey, this is for those that know me that have ever watched any of my videos. As one as I was prompted, I normally don't put my face up on a black mirror, a deadlight magnet mirror. But I was prompted back in Reno, Nevada, to just start doing them, and I was doing. They were very short segments, and so when you realize you're running on a circulation library, right? Of memory held in water banks, blood banks, and how that works between two magnets, right? And of course, all the fall of Metatron's cube and how that works. But this video is not really to go into a vast amount of information that's related to that, because that's information that we experience, that we share with others, of what we're learning as we're experiencing as we're going. Right? So I always put the first qualifier up, which simply means is that what I do, because I realize the relationship that we have when you think of how we describe or define what it means to be a student or a learner, as I call it. I call myself learning, because when I was a little kid, I was on fire to learn. Okay? So I recognized when I was 4 years of age, I'm translating the codes, the language codes, of the realm that we're in, and realize we're in a black hole. Okay, because there's obviously a torque speed differential between an electron donor and an electron giver. Or growing up during the 50s, they were known as the haves and the have-nots. And what it means to be programmed to become an inverter on behalf of a corporation, how that sort of works. But the reason I was doing the short segments of what I've experienced, that I share what I communicate based on what I have experienced, that we're learning from by being connected with all the others through computer terminals, biocomputers, and a motherboard, right? And so there's a lot of different ways that we can impart information, even if you use the traditional teacher training sort of curriculum way that teachers are trained in their academic schools to impart information to students, that does put that information in memory. And now we get into the future, past, back to the future, what we experience, but what we load. The codes, the mathematical codes, the mathematical, geometrical, graphical user interface of what we load in memory, which is the RAM, which is the minus slash the plus, the charge of what we experience in a hologram. Right? And so it's better for me when I share a lot of this stuff, because the libraries are so vast, because they're circulating amongst all of us that are running circulation libraries of bioplasma, right? Molten voltage, right? And speed, at which we're learning through each other the direction that we're all going in together, being connected with each other through consciousness, right? And so I'm always reminded of my childhood when I think of who my guides were, like my biological mother and my father, including my older sisters, right? Because remember, back in the day, you need a babysitter, right? And so you're navigating or mapping the terrain, which is mapping the codes, which is mapping the software, the operators of the software. And so now you're experiencing in the mirror, just like I'm experiencing in the mirror, those that are blowing holes in their energy field. And we know what that leads up to. It means their shield is down. Now you can have body snatchers, right? They're going to take over the vehicle. Now they run the vehicle, right? Their energy's running the vehicle. What happened to the original identity? Now you understand how that applies in consciousness to an APIN system, where there was an acceleration of beings, body snatchers, if you will, because you could map the terrain of the increase of inverters, right? Versus electron donors. And this plays a part over time-space continuums of multiple timelines that are running based on the torque speed differential to maintain the balance between the two poles, right? Between the chromosome pairs, or the instruction sets, right, that are paired up between two magnets, right? And so it's best I felt when I did my earlier videos to just share pieces. It's like a crossword puzzle, and it very much does work this way because I've experienced it. Because of, for example, the library that Patty Broussard opened up. She runs off a vast amount of information, visual and mathematical information. She opens up that library. So I referred to her and said this to her: thank you. You filled in a lot of blank spaces, right? Of information. It's like having a puzzle of a gazillion pieces that represents the underlying causality of why we're experiencing what we're experiencing, being connected to each other in those libraries. So it would be like a librarian that's filling bookshelves of visual, mathematical, geometrical information, the GUI user interface in a mirror. So you're building libraries. And so you're removing books and you're putting books in place. So that's a circulation library. And that's done when I do it as a polarity integrator, right? Based on collapsing timelines, which is based on visual, mathematical, geometrical information that is not connected, which is consciousness that is connected, right, to time wave zero, the crystal spiral. That's essentially our job as polarity integrators, is to reintegrate units of consciousness that went rogue, right, that split off, fractured off. That's a fractal light mind virus. Now that shard, right, is now experiencing darkness, if you will, black. In other words, it lost its part of its identity. The energy that it was once experiencing being part of the whole is no longer experiencing being part of the whole. So that becomes an alternate universe. That unit of consciousness is separated from itself because it's not experiencing what love is. Now it can run a machine. That's your AI machinery, right? So now you have a larger acceleration of artificial light because it's finite light, which will ultimately implode and return to God, eternity, but it simply will be a smaller unit of consciousness again that now has to accrete its way back to the larger formation again, because the largest formation of consciousness is what love is, right? Because we're all playing music to keep the stars and keep the music playing because we're connected to the first musician, the one musician, the first wave, the first musical spirit, the eternal spirit of fire. So the spirit, eternal spirit of fire is what purifies the light, which is purifying what we're exposed to that represents all the stuff that they throw at us, which is all the tech, right? Burn it right off. It's like a firewall. So it can't get through the firewall. It's just too hot, right? Yeah, so that's where the relationship with acid and alkaline comes in, right? But in this particular case, I wanted to share some experiences that I have, particularly being in this house, and how it relates to like my childhood of being around others who were guiding me, if you will, on how we call self-correction or correcting behavior, right? And how that works being in a captured, what I call a captured system, right? And as if you're operating behind enemy-held lines, running a stealth code, in and out. Can't catch you. You're moving in and out too fast, right? In other words, you're in a black hole and out of a black hole, in a black hole, out of a black hole, doing work, right? It works much like that. That's how I experience it. So here are some examples of it's like sometimes I reflect on why I end up in places that I end up in, even though I implicitly trust the journey that I'm on because I am what love is and living spirit that goes on forever, gifting electrons, gifting love energy, right? Because you have so much love and compassion and you're hypersensitive because the antenna is hypersensitive. So you're picking up on everything that is out of balance. Right? So you're a tuner. You're a self-tuning radio set so that everything is in balance. So when I think about my childhood, for example, of knowing the difference between what's right and what's wrong, loading the program information held in RAM by what other people are running in their RAM, right? So here are some examples to give you an idea of what this is like. For example, just being in this particular house, for example. And I've made reference to it because there's at least 3 or 4 people that live here that are blowing holes in their energy field. Okay? So I have to be very, very careful on how I impart what it is I've experienced by virtue of what I've learned that might have value to them, right? Because they're picking up on it, right? But they're picking up on it in what I call a non-reactive way, which means it's just like information is just floating right by. Oh, because they can experience the frequency upon which that information, which is codes, mathematical geometrical codes, in which it's not perceived as an attack, even though it's the truth, right? So that's like a neutral reaction, which means it's like becoming aware of something, right? As if the messenger that represents the message, okay, is simply the information, which means the messenger is not the enemy. The information is simply the information. Now they become aware of the information in a neutral way. So what they choose to do with it is what? Based on their reaction state, on how they perceive what it is they are in energy, and then the application of that information, how it is applied in the way that they might apply it. So for example, I'll give you an example. I've shared a mountain of information and resources because Nathan, for example, which is RH negative, is eager to learn. He has covered a lot of bases. He shares with me all the time about going here and going there. He talks to me about how much he's learned through the Essenes, who Jesus Christ was, the chakras, right? He's very much loves to be in nature. He knows a lot about identifying plants, how plants grow, what's good for you, what's not good for you. He has a wealth of information that you operate on. And I've known this ever since childhood, which means you can have a wealth of knowledge, right? But it's the application of that knowledge, right? And how that knowledge or that information is applied by what we experience by the application of that information as it relates to what? Balance. So neutral is like information that is neutral, which is free of charge because it's being sent or communicated with love, which is the polarity integration side of things, which means no charge. So in other words, they're experiencing the neutral aspect, the aspect of the light, the angle of communication, right? That's not seeking to lower their frequency or create an imbalance in their own energy field, even though I'm experiencing with my antenna the imbalance in that energy field that they're running as it relates to a couple of comments that have been put up by friends of mine, particularly Irina, when she talked about twin flames, and we get into the male and the female side of things, or the XY chromosomes, the silver and the gold, liquid consciousness, liquid silver consciousness, liquid gold consciousness becomes one, right? And so for me, I have a lot of fun with this because of the colors that I see through my third eye now, and being able to work with the sun when I do breathing work out there and see the expansion of pink across the whole skyline, the mirror in the sky, generating pink, right, through my heart and my soul, because we're mirrors. We're mirroring that together. So we're breathing together, a living, breathing aloha of a pink rose, a diamond sun pink rose, right? And putting a bubble of love around this house, protect everybody that's here because of how much love that I have for everybody that's in here, even though I'm experiencing what they do to themselves, right? And then experiencing the result of that in the house. And that obviously becomes a challenge, right? Because therefore there's a lot of dirty electricity, not the least of which they have a 5G terminal over here, okay, which is why we're this, okay, even though I have the ability to clear. In other words, it doesn't affect me like it would others, okay? Let's put it this way, it doesn't affect me. Part of the cough that you experience when I'm in the mirror, when you see me, that's the biofilm. That's actually the phone that's doing this. The AI is doing that to me by what it's pushing as ions through the mirror, which is the phone, okay, into my mirror, okay? So I'm experiencing a weaponized system, okay? That's like that right there. That's the mirror that I'm communicating to you with that does that. So that would mean that I'm willing to use a weaponized system of consciousness to communicate with all the others that I do on this phone. That's correct. So I've mentioned before, I had a communication signal a little over a year ago in Liebeck, a stop to get rid of the phone, okay, because it's unnecessary at this point. And so why would I get a communication like that, right? Because I know what those communications are telling me and why that is. And believe it or not, it has to do with time looping and using your consciousness to run a system that runs a time loop, and how that works with an AI that knows how to rearrange the deck chairs on the Atlantic by what we're holding in RAM. And I experience that a lot because I realize that it keeps trying to push things that it already knows that I've experienced, of what's been held in memory and experienced already. So that means you're not experiencing anything new. You're experiencing the same timeline that is represented by the one that it runs, which is the one that's going to implode, right? Because of the work that's been done. So it's a matter of knowing what timeline you're on, which means there is no time. There's only what love is. So now you're measuring those that have been healing, those that are able to, if you will, repair the codes by experiencing more balance in others that we experience in us. So we experience, as we navigate through a field of consciousness, those that are healing and those that still need healing, right? And so when you sort of put this in the context of how much work has actually already been done, particularly if you go back through the time-space continuum of how much information was actually being revealed of the work that was being done, that goes all the way back to when the Guardian materials were actually first coming out, which is a long time ago. Even though when I think of time and an event or an experience, just like when I go back to my childhood, it's just like, man, that was like yesterday, because you haven't even left. You're still there. You're still experiencing eternal love through your own heart and soul. Right? So I'll give you a couple of examples of sensitivity, right? Particularly on some of the challenges that I have here, okay? And so these are like comparisons, self-reflecting on possibly making some decisions to move out of here. Even though I know why I'm here, because of the this, everything that I previously recorded and shared about why the Big Island was an important place, because it's of the amount of energy that is here on this rock that's being generated, and the vortex that is here, particularly over in La Hoi Hoi, which is where I'm at, that's running Metatronic, okay? And why there are so many, if you will, beautiful people that I've experienced on this island, and why they're here doing work, healing work, right, that are here. And I've met many of them all over the island, right? So sometimes I'm very careful about what I share by what I experience that relates to others versus what I experience just being by myself, right? And this is true when you're in the house with other people, that it's much like, I sort of put some comedy into this, right? But it does go back to my childhood. So, for example, when I grew up in the house that I did with my parents, it was largely peaceful, okay? Maintaining the harmony and the balance of the waves that are in an equilibrium state, right? Of experiencing no charge, okay? So that you're experiencing, it's quiet. Wow, it's quiet. Being quiet, right? Silent running. Telepathic silence. Remember the scene with Neil and Mr. Smith? Next thing you know, Neil, his lips are closed, he can't talk, he can't say a word. So there's a door right next to my room here, okay, that goes into the garage, okay? And so what happens is when folks go in and out of that door, there are some folks that realize there might be somebody sleeping in that room next door. I'm aware of it because my antenna is very sensitive to know that. I don't want to make a bunch of noise when I'm moving out, when I'm traveling. to disturb anybody's peace. So I can open the door and move. In other words, transport my consciousness into the garage area without that being in that room even know that I did that. That's called silent running, because the antenna is so sensitive to another antenna, does not want the other antenna to even know that it was present. Because the level of sound that's being made cannot be picked up by an antenna. Whoa. See? So you can measure the sensitivity of an antenna based on the antenna that goes in and out of that door every day. Right? Which is a state of awareness. Right? And then the other one would be growing up as a child, right? And realizing, like, the power company, we're having to deal with the power company. Apparently, I was notified last Thursday that, hey, we got a $3,700 electric bill. That's an inverter bill, okay? Wasn't it the Rothschild family, I guess, that's got a monopoly on the electrical system on the grid? Right, all the electric companies, utility companies, all the public utilities, aren't they? Where the buck stops, doesn't it stop right at the City of London? Getting a bill from the electric company, which is a bill, and it's $3,700. Okay, and so it came to me. Now the two other people, the girl and the guy that are living upstairs, are sort of freaked out. What are we going to do now? The bill hasn't been paid, and so now we have Jason. Jason, who's the owner, right? And so the agreement that I had with the owner, because when he first met me on the property, and I told him that I've been giving Aaron, several $100s every month as sort of, I sort of know this, okay, that they're actually gifts, okay. I gift it to Aaron, and I have to deal with the fact that you realize what he's going to do with that money, right? He's going to use it to go get stuff that's going to blow holes in his energy field. Why are you enabling him like that? So I had to deal with that, right? Because he needs money for gas, and he does. He does use that money for gas to get himself around, because Aaron doesn't have a job, okay? But Aaron's got to find some way. Now we're back to drug addicts and alcoholics. They got to find some way to support the habit, right? And so this is like going all the way back to my childhood. So what I try and do is, because I've been there and experienced that, I know what works, which is to recover your soul and your spirit, which you've lost, which is the fragment. Now we're back to polarity integration, right? Because I don't impose my will on somebody else, right? And so now we're with a situation where all of a sudden Aaron sort of got caught now, okay, where it's back, the old idea of it's now back in your face. How are you going to deal with this? And dealing with what we call honor, right? Because when Jason met me, okay, and apparently Aaron has never met the owner before. When Aaron met me down at La Polihoy and says, listen, I'm staying in this beautiful house, and then he invited me to stay here, and I'm in this room. See, this is the room. And at first, I was only here for about maybe a week and a half, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I wasn't anticipating staying here, okay, because I'm really mobile with a backpack. It's sort of like implicitly trusting your journey, and wherever I'm supposed to be is wherever I'm supposed to be. So as events unfold throughout the course of going from one day, sun up to sundown, to the next, whatever events are supposed to happen, where I'm supposed to be, they will naturally unfold the way they're supposed to be, because of the work that I do and who I'm connected with, right? The eternal spirit of God's fire. And so I was paying Aaron, okay, every month, okay, and it was my understanding that it was going to be paid towards the electric bill, right? So when the owner shows up, the agreement that him and I had with each other was that the electric bill, I would put forth $500 towards the electric bill, right? So now you can see what's happening now that the electric bill has not gotten paid. Where'd all that money go, right? So now what's happened is Nika and his girlfriend, who live upstairs, freaked out, calls Jason. Now, the other part of this I didn't mention before, when Jason came back the first time, remember I mentioned about when I told Aaron that the owner was here, and he said, "Oh, I'm in deep shit." And it's because he figured that, listen, I'm giving you a beautiful place to live here on the Big Island, free of charge, okay? And when I come back here, the place has become it's like, you know, and so he told Aaron, "You're out of here. You got 2 weeks to pack your gear and get out of here, right? Or Aaron's still here, okay?" So in that conversation that I had with Aaron about how that's sort of unfolding, see, Aaron is very intelligent and knows how to play a war game. And you not understand how when you're hooked up with an AI that's a military strategist, right? Aaron has a lot of, this is how it works. You want to fuck me, I got a lot of ways to fuck back with you, and you're going to realize whether or not I'm even worth tangling with because of what I can do to you, because of what you're going to do to me. That's an AI war game. That's how it works. Okay, so that becomes on a crap table, or a blackjack table. That's called a push. You know what a push is, right? That's a stalemate or a Mexican standoff because of the torque differential speed between inverters and torque converters, right? To experience balance. So the other day when Kika upstairs says, I'm going to call Jason on what Jason wants to do with this, right? So here's what happened. Aaron came up to me, I guess it was on Friday, and said, "Listen, the phone bill is going to be put in Jason's name, okay, so that it doesn't get shut off. And then I'm going to have to make payments on this bill, right? So we're going to use your $500 being put in Jason's name, right?" And I said, "Okay." So he said he's on his way down to Hilo and was going to use the $500, set up the account that's going to go into Jason's name, right? And I said, "We went down the ATM. Here's the $500, buddy." He came back Friday night, and the lady upstairs came up to me and said, Here, we're going to take care of this. It's going to go in Jason's name, but here we're going to give you the money back, right?" "Oh, okay." So here we are. What is it, Wednesday or Thursday now? I haven't heard a peep. I'm still sitting on $500. The electricity is still on in the house, right? This is how it is to be in these situations, right? And particularly when you think of maintaining peace, maintaining harmony, and how all that works. When you realize that you're in a situation, and I mentioned it to his friend Nathan the other day, that have you ever heard of that old saying, "Waiting for the shoe to drop"? Right? When you're blowing holes in your own energy field, or you're running a self-destruct program, and how that works between seeded races that are targeting other races. Okay, because one of the things that he did, okay, Aaron went and got the jab, and I'm going, what the fuck is the matter with you? Right? For as intelligent as he is, why would he ever do that? Now, he tried to commit suicide, apparently, about a week ago, as a result of the dog being gone. I love Aaron with all my heart and soul. And probably, if when I think of folks that I've associated with that need healing in a really bad way, because of everything that he's experienced that I know that is based on trauma, because I'm very familiar with how much resistance that Aaron has, because I measured it, of what it's going to take, okay, and in order to heal and integrate what was lost. But it would appear at this point that those fragments, okay, it would be like in a universe, right, that they're split all over the place. Right, and you sort of understand how that works when it comes to being in recovery. Recovery, right? Recovering those fragments. And this is particularly true when you have somebody who tells you that I hate my mother, and that's an understatement, and therefore is now choosing to engage in, if you will, how powerful sexual energy is when it's male to male, sexual energy being experienced, the phosphorus. right? And how much of that is taking place on this island and how that works with gender splitting technology, right? Even though there's only one. The eternal God of love, the eternal spirit of fire, right? That's why, as a polarity integrator, lighting myself on fire, right? There's only one true God, okay? That's the one I experience through my heart and my soul, which is what love is, goes on forever. That's the energy that I use to heal myself while I'm in here, right? Every day, because of what I'm exposed to every day, because there's just an enormous amount of negative energy in here, in this particular house. You'd say, well, my God, guy, why don't you leave the house? Because if I was supposed to leave, I wouldn't be here. If I'm not supposed to be here, I wouldn't be here, would I? Okay? Because of the importance of what I do when I go out on the rock right outside here and try and keep a bubble of love over this house. Okay? Because you got to know that the God that I'm connected with, which goes on forever, is not going to abandon. Okay? It's sort of like the old idea I mentioned to Patty Broussard one time, because I know this is true, because I experience this, because this is the relationship that I have with an eternal spirit of fire. Okay? And that is, we don't leave a soul fragment on a spiritual battlefield, do we? Because ultimately, it will always return to source from which it all began, which is what love is. It goes on forever, gifting love energy. So ultimately, when you think of using the word non-repairables, it's not like, they're, how do I put this? When you think of how eternity works and how time-space works, about lost in space and how long it's going to take before a unit of consciousness that represents a black hole, before it's going to implode and then experience love again. How long is that going to take? Well, how old is this black hole? For how long have wars been going on between units of energy that is conscious and aware of itself against another unit of consciousness that's experiencing its own mirror that is trying to destroy, which means it's trying to destroy itself, because it's not experiencing what love is that it has for itself, that it's sharing with others in its own mirror. Right? So that's another math game. Excuse me, another math. It's all in the math. When you think of units of energy, units of consciousness, how small and how big they are as a formation of consciousness, right? And so these are just, what I do is I share some of these as just experiences of what I do anyway, what I experience every day, because of how much love and compassion that we have for everybody that's here, and how easy, I shouldn't say easy, but I know from when I was 4 years of age in 1951, when you're experiencing trauma on an entire planetary or galactic and universal terrain that we map, how much electrical resistance there is to experience no resistance, as it was originally designed, which means every unit of consciousness that exists within that template is experiencing what love is. Right? Which means every unit of consciousness is experiencing the law, which is love is the law, because it began with what love is. So when you enter into free will and imposing our will on another, right, it's very, very tricky ground. And I'll give you an example. Last night, because these guys tweak a lot, right? You know what a tweaker is, right? Using crack. It's rampant on this island. Okay, so you can sort of get a pretty good idea when you have that many units of consciousness running around in hominid-looking biped bodies, right, that are doing this to themselves, why this became what was known as a Draco stronghold. Okay, and why I was led to come here the first time I got here, which was in January 5th of 2017, right? But it has to do with how we communicate to others that are doing things to disturb your peace, and doing it in a peaceful way, so that they can reflect on themselves of their own behavior to realize what they're doing, okay, does not serve them, okay, but doing it in a way in which the message is neutral, so that you're not going to get a negative magnetic reaction state from somebody who's running a water memory bank that is negative magnetic polarity. And that becomes extraordinarily challenging when you have a unit of consciousness in the way that is defined as an identity, a dissociative identity disorder that's running a black mirror. When you communicate with a black mirror, the difficulty is that they're not going to self-reflect on themselves with the light, right? The correction that is going to take place out of the love, the compassion, the respect, and the honor that they have for others who communicate to them what they become aware of, what I'm aware of, and then I share that with them. That's how I communicate with them. Okay? Just like there was a guy up here the other night that was making all kinds of loud noises at midnight. And you'd say, how can he not know that there's somebody down here probably sleeping? Obviously, when you're dealing with folks that tweak, they're taking speed, their cycles, between the sun coming up is all over the place, right? Because their energy is all over the place, because it's not in balance. So when I communicate to them, what I say is, I'm simply making you aware of what I'm aware of. Now you're aware of what I'm aware of. And then see what their internal response is going to be to that, which means I'm not trying to tell you what to do, impose my will on you. I'm now making you aware, because obviously you're now aware of what I'm aware of, by communicating to you that I'm now aware of because I woke up as a result of what I became aware of as a result of what you're doing with your awareness, the energy that represents what you are. So now we're back to the sensitivity of antennas and how communicating to somebody else, right, on whether or not they care, right, and how that relates to how we care for ourselves. And how this relates to healing, restoring ourselves, right? And so this happened last night, right, with the door being slammed, 11 o'clock at night, as if it doesn't have any awareness that there's somebody that's sleeping 4 feet from the door, right? So simply making that person aware in a neutral way, right? And then seeing if there's any behavioral change, which means showing that they do have honor and respect for elders, right? Which is the honor and respect that they give to themselves, which is to ourselves, right? Now we're back to what I do to you, I do to me, right? So you can see when you start out at 4 years of age and navigating through a consciousness field, where you're trying to maintain the balance between the poles and how many units of consciousness are accelerating, right? What we experience in the future as a result of what they do in the past, so to speak, when it comes to seed, breeding experiments, and seed, the seed that gets passed on and then it reproduces. What is it reproducing? And then it reproduces, and then it reproduces. And you see how the network gets built off of a tree trunk or a matrix, right? I'm spreading that seed as fast as it can. Because it's sort of like this. If you have a vampire and it wants to accelerate another vampire in order to collapse the whole enchilada, which means we're going to accelerate the exponential function, the log scale, of accelerating that seed so that that seed gets spread everywhere, then that's visual mathematical codes that's being spread that's going to another lab, right? And how that lab is now going to produce another software system that is doing what? How memory works. And the DNA works as a software system connected to a larger network. So now the acceleration of that black hole becomes a log scale exponent of how fast is that black hole expanding and accelerating, and how you can map that in a universe between the torque speed differential and a black hole versus those that are experiencing in their consciousness and their energy, running their software, experiencing what love is. Right? So this is what I call small scale stuff, of measuring it on a small scale stuff, right? Because when I was a child, I thought to myself, I'm just going to go live in a cage and just wait it out, right? But that's called, when you get into war, an AI war game strategy between negative and positive magnetic polarity, that would be called inaction, right? Or if you call the laws of engagement or war, the rules of engagement. Remember, rule-based functions, computers running on rule-based functions, the instruction sets, and the use of our energy in order to solve a problem. So I don't use my energy the way they use their energy to communicate and solve problems when it comes to an APIN grid network, right? Now we're back to stealth code, know me planet. And so I simply share some of the things that others can identify with, and the success or failure, if you will, although I can tell you this, failure was not an option when we voted to do this. Okay? We were not going to allow an ascension cycle to go flat, if you will, or not be pulled off. The tug of war, push and pull, this was going to get pulled off. That means that we all made an absolute eternal commitment to bring eternal fire in here and make sure that this one happens. We were not going to revisit this issue again. And what I know is that ever again. Okay? Because there's a reason, right? Adam, the crystal atom seed, has a reason for that, right? So these are corrections that are taking place in the cycles, the atom cycles, the atmospherics, right? That are in balance between hot and cold magnets, right? Fire and ice. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, as they say. 3 cents. Me too. No, me three. Me three in one. Have a great day. I love you all.